You got arrested at a pro-Palestine protest the other day. Tell everybody what happened, because my understanding is it's a pretty wild story.
It was a very wild story. I mean, I'm reminded of this story every time I take a deep breath because I'm still kind of recovering from the injuries, and I'm about to go back and seek additional medical attention to be sure they didn't miss something there with those X-rays. Who knows? But we had been. We were at a campaign event just a couple blocks away from the Washington University campus. There were many students there who were absolutely eloquent about what they were doing. They had just started an encampment that day. And as our event broke up, the students asked if we would please come over and show support. And we said, of course, because they really are, they're leading the charge really in so many ways. And they're also taking all the risks, their careers, their graduation, their tuition, being blacklisted for the future, et cetera. They're taking all the risks themselves. So we said, of course, we will go there to show support. And we went, simply to be there on the sidelines. And first thing was that the leadership of the encampment asked us, would we please join the elected officials? There were two elected officials from St. Louis who were there. And we went as a delegation a couple times, actually, to speak with the administrators that were there. And at first it seemed like maybe they were listening, and then they weren't. And then the police blocked us from even trying to talk with the administrators when we went back. And as tensions were rising, the students asked us, would we please join the line surrounding the encampment? And we said, of course, we would. And we did. And then, eventually the police came at us with bicycles as battering rams. And, some of the footage that's circulating shows how they were really ramming that bike into me, trying to knock me over backwards. And in fact, what you can't see in the video, you can just kind of see the corner of it, is that the cop in front of me then, as I'm just barely maintaining my balance, not being knocked over back on my head, he picks up one of my feet, to go in for the kill, basically, to flip me backwards. And, fortunately, my reflex was to just jerk my foot away. And it was really lucky that I was able to do that. But when I did, he then said to me, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't remember exactly the words, but it's, you're under arrest for assaulting a police officer.
Oh my God.
As they're trying to throw me back onto my head. And,
let me just interject for a second here, just so everybody understands. How old are you?
I'm 73 going on 74 in a couple days. Yes.
73-year-old woman who is running for president as the Green Party candidate, and their claim is you assaulted them.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Jeez.
Astonishing. And so what happened? What happened next?
Well, we were thrown to the ground eventually, and, manhandled, rolled over, face down, tightly zip-tied, and then walked over to the paddy wagon, where eventually about 100 people were, carted over to, at first, the on-campus processing facility, and then over to the county jail. And initially, we were all in cells together, and there was this sense of safety in numbers. And then as we were being released one by one, I was directed in a different direction alone, and where I was then put through a separate process. No one was in there but me. And then eventually another man kind of shuffled in. And this was Stephen Tamari, a history professor from the University of Illinois, who had been brutally assaulted. He was simply taking pictures on his iPhone, and there's footage circulating of his assault, which is far worse than what happened to me.
He's the one who had ribs broken, correct?
That's right. He broke 9 ribs. He was hospitalized that night.
Wow.
And he and I were in there together. He also was charged with assault. And you can see from his... Yeah, so I mean, clearly this is like a defense that the cops use if they're worried about being charged with assault. They countercharge you first in order to, I don't know, I don't understand the legal aspects of this, but it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy and outrageous. And these are police forces who were trained by the IOF, the Israeli occupation forces, who participate in these trainings all around the country, and in fact, all around the world, these international law enforcement exchanges. And St. Louis has been a part of that. So, it's just so ironic that in protesting, the Israeli fascist state, we are subjected to the tactics of fascist policing, basically, which has been taught now to our police forces. And the case in point, of course, is Cop City, which is one of, it turns out, some 70 or so such cop cities that are either in the planning or in the works around the country. So, to my mind, what happened on campus is just more evidence that we don't have to wait for Donald Trump to see fascism. Fascism is alive and well, and, being inflicted by the violence of our police forces, which are being released on peaceful student protesters. It's just staggering that our universities are doing this in order to protect their investments in the war profiteering industry in the setting of a genocide. It's like, this is just such a sick symbol of, what's wrong with our economy and with our democracy and with our rights to free speech and the right to protest being suppressed along with it. It's just a really sobering reminder that our democracy is absolutely on life support right now.
I think that is so well said. And Dr. Stein, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are yourself Jewish, correct?
That's right. Yes.
So
absolutely.
I wonder where the media outrage at this violence against a Jewish woman being assaulted for her beliefs, wonder where that media outrage is. Because that's one of the things that this is so exposed. I mean, not that it wasn't already so naked, but this conversation about, this is all about safety and student safety on campus. When you have a professor being assaulted, broken ribs, a presidential candidate being assaulted, still suffering the consequences, a 73-year-old Jewish woman presidential candidate being assaulted and accused of assault. It's insane. I saw a cameraman in Texas who was there as part of the press, like local news guy, just trying to do his job, who was charged with assault because, and the exact reverse was true. You have at UCLA, the counter-protesters, the pro-Israel counter-protesters funded by Bill Ackman and Jessica Seinfeld.
Jerry Seinfeld.
Jessica Seinfeld.
Oh, the wife?
Yeah, the wife.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Who were the source of the violence. So clearly they do not care about student safety, because if they did, they wouldn't be sending in, thugs to assault students, professors, and their allies alike.
Exactly. I mean, this is just such shallow justification and an excuse for really violently suppressing political speech, for violently suppressing a debate about Zionism that badly needs to be had. And that's what they're terrified of. And it's just such a disgusting joke that they who are bringing in the riot police to create a riot, they who are bringing in the racist Zionist mob to attack a peaceful, multicultural, multi-religious exercise of our constitutional rights, that they are screaming foul. They are screaming, "Oh, you're creating violence." I think this is such a mask off moment right now.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any way that this rabid Zionism and this weaponization of anti-Semitism is going to survive. I think there's just way too much that's evident, that's public record now.
Yeah.
I think they are going to be forced and humiliated into changing. How that happens, I'm not sure. And it may be what Frederick Douglass said, that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. I don't expect power to roll over by itself. To my mind, this is why we need multipartisan democracy. This is why we need we need political opposition to shine daylight on this catastrophe that's going on abroad and at home.
Does this remind you of the anti-Iraq war protests and the anti-Vietnam war protests, or has it even escalated and surpassed those?
The data from Columbia University, and I think it was from 68, that it was something like 700 people who were arrested at Columbia and 150 who were hospitalized. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to remember, and then there was Kent State, and, four students were murdered. It feels very similar to me, having been very much a part of that, especially the anti-Vietnam protests. I was in college at the time, and we occupied our administration building at Harvard, and basically the university was shut down. We opened a public people's university that went on for weeks, I think. So it was extremely intense, and I think a lot of that was really fueled by the fact that lives were on the line and the draft was in force. Now I think there's a similar engine. It's not that people are being drafted, but their lives are kind of hopeless. When you look at what the younger generation is facing, they are, they don't have the jobs. They don't have access to housing. They don't have really the promise of being able to raise families. It's much too expensive. You have 60%, over 60% are living paycheck to paycheck. All this impacts students as kind of the latest victim of this predatory economy that's approaching young people as, just the latest cash cow. Their future is screwed, and add to that climate change, So young people are really up in arms, and while they're not being drafted, their lives are already under assault. And, according to polls, half of young people describe themselves as hopeless about the future. And an astounding 1/4 of young people have contemplated harming themselves within 2 weeks of the poll. This is like the most disastrous indicator of, the state of our society. No society survives by devouring its young. And yet that is kind of what our predatory economy is doing. They know it. So they're putting it all on the line. And while we're not yet in a Kent State situation, it's not hard to see that we are accelerating towards that, because they are not giving up at the same time that, the forces of empire and political repression here at home continue to double down. So we are in a very, a very precarious situation right now. And I think what's going on in Gaza is sort of the symbol of that, that you have. We're on a death watch, really, for 2 million people in Gaza, and it's just miraculous that they survive day to day. And I think the students, they are rightly morally outraged about this, but I think there's also kind of a sense of identification with Gaza as sort of the personification of how, ordinary human beings are being victimized by this world that's been created by empire and oligarchy. And that's really the terms of the fight. The bigger fight here is whether we continue down this pathway, which is not survivable for anyone.
One of the things that has been revealing about this discourse around campus protest is how sociopathic some of our journalistic and political class are. They're so confused by the idea that these students would really genuinely care this much.
That's right.
About people that aren't themselves.
Right.
That they would see kids being slaughtered, that they would see a genocide being conducted with our support and enabled and tax dollars, et cetera, that could not happen without us, and that they would be horrified to the point of protest. They're so confused by that. I think they genuinely can't believe that people would be horrified to the point of risking their careers, risking their academic record, risking arrest, et cetera. You see these pieces like, we don't really understand what the students want. It's like, they're telling you what they want. They're saying it plainly. Are you really so dead inside that you can't imagine seeing, these babies that starve to death, these kids who, having their leg cut off with a kitchen knife on a kitchen table with no anesthetic, and you feel nothing. You can't understand how that moves. People, to me, that's been one of the most shocking revelations, is that I think they genuinely struggle to wrap their heads around what that might feel like to care so deeply about someone who you have no connection to.
All right, guys, that's just a little clip of our long discussion with Dr. Jill Stein. It was really interesting. Highly, highly recommend you see the whole thing. Sign up below on Substack. If you pay $5 a month, you get the video of every interview and you get it a day early. Or you could sign up for free on Substack and get the audio podcast delivered right to your email inbox a day later when it drops. You're definitely going to want to check this interview out. She's the Green Party candidate. She's running against Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and RFK now. And she's really the only voice that's out there saying, I'm against the open genocide and ethnic cleansing. So you're going to want to check this interview out. Sign up below.